Thank you so much. I'm Meg Oeller, and I'm here with my colleague Amy Omer. We're both veterinarians at the FDA Center for Veterinary Medicine in the Office of Minor Use and Minor Species Animal Drug Development. The mission of our office is to try and get more drugs legally available for minor species and for minor uses in the major species. So, no surprise, sheep and goats are both minor. So we are there to try to help you get more things that you need. I have more slides than time, so I have been told that the presentation will be posted on the ASI website, sheepusa.org. So I'm going to try to go through this as quickly as possible, hitting on the really important points a little harder. But then there are lots of links and references to documents, all of which are posted on our website for the FDA. But there's a lot of good information on the FDA website, but it's a little hard to navigate. So I want you to have those links. And I can't really see this, which isn't good.
Right in front of you there.
Yeah, I'm going to have to stand to the side, or I can't see. Okay, let's see if we can do this. No, that's all right. I'll just stand over here. Okay, so here's what we're going to talk about very quickly today. What is the Veterinary Feed Directive? Why are things changing? What was the paper trail that got us here? How does it affect you? And get into some specifics about sheep, some other options that are available to you, and a little crystal ball gazing. Okay, what is a VFD? A VFD is a marketing status, and it's a piece of paper. Or it can be electronic now, because we are in the 21st century. So when a drug is approved, FDA approves the label, and it says what species it can be used in, what disease it's for, the dosage, the withdrawal time. All that information goes on the label, including what its marketing status is. Is this something that's going to be over the counter that you can buy at the Tractor Supply? Is it something that's going to be requiring a veterinarian? Now, until a few years ago, this only applied to prescription products, and because the feed mills did not want pharmacists when we went to prescription things, medicated feeds were never prescription. So they've been over the counter until recently, and then what came in was the Veterinary Feed Directive, which is a prescription equivalent requiring veterinarians' oversight, so that you can get a medicated feed that requires more information in terms of diagnosis and things than we would want on an over-the-counter product. Okay, so a lot of the, well, many water-soluble powders are prescription. Injectables, other oral dosage forms have been prescription for a long time. Some of them are not, but some of them are, and a few that didn't used to be are going to be now. It requires a veterinarian, as I mentioned, and there's got to be a pharmacist somewhere in the chain. And the VFD is going to be something that you get from the vet, and it's going to go to the feed mill, and it has to be within the context of a valid veterinary client-patient relationship, which that comes up, that VCPR, you'll hear a lot. We like acronyms in the government. So what is a valid VCPR? There's three main points that in the regulations that define it. The vet has to be licensed. The vet has to know you and your farm well enough to at least come in and make a guess about what's going on there. And they have to be available for follow-up. And the main reason for this is just to prevent internet pharmacies from saying, oh, we have a vet on staff and they've never seen your animals, and we don't want them writing prescriptions or VFDs for you. Okay, as I said, up till recently, most of what you were using was over the counter and you could get it all kinds of places. But as of this month, medically important antimicrobials used in medicated feed and water have switched to be prescription or VFD status. So why is it happening? There are lots of people, scientists, medical people, consumer groups, Congress people who are very concerned about antimicrobial resistance, and I know that you are too. It has many, many causes animal agriculture is only part of it. And as I said, I'm going to try to go fast here. So in really simple terms, if we are using antibiotics that are used in human medicine for claims like weight gain and feed efficiency, where you're using a low level for a long time, you're exposing a lot of bacteria, killing off the weak ones and letting the strong ones continue. And so then if those animals were treated with a drug that is supposed to be used in people also, people get sick from a foodborne illness, they go to the hospital, the antibiotic doesn't work. That's why people are upset. Okay. All right. We're in the government, we have documents. Guidance for industry is, there are lots of them, as you can see, number 213 up there. This is what FDA tells the pharmaceutical companies. If you want to get your drug approved, this is what you need to do for target animal safety. This is what you need to do for environmental safety. And so these three are one followed the other to deal with this topic. First one came out in 2003, Guidance 152. This was telling the regulated industry, okay, drug company, you want to get this drug approved, you have to do a whole food safety component, and it has to include now how are we going to address antimicrobial resistance. So it's just the data they had to provide. 209 came about in 2012, where we actually laid out our policy about how we were going to deal with antimicrobial resistance as an issue at the Center for Veterinary Medicine. And it comes down to two main things. We want to get therapeutic uses only, so that we're not doing these long-term, low-dose uses for weight gain and feed efficiency. And we wanted to have veterinarians involved to make the diagnosis and prescribe. 213 is where we said to the drug companies, because this is guidance, it's not law, it's not legally binding, but what we said is, we'd like you to voluntarily take all those weight gain feed efficiency claims just off these medically important antimicrobials, and we would like you to change them to either prescription if it's in water or VFD if it's in feed. And it was voluntary, and every single company stepped up and did it, and they did it in time. I think last week we did the last one, or the very end of December. So that's all right. I've told you that. We're changing the claims and the marketing status. So what's included? What do you need to do? What does your vet need to do? And what about the feed mills? And since I'm assuming that most of you are producers, the vets heard a lot of this in the animal health section, and I don't think there are a lot of feed mill people here. I'm going to concentrate on the producer's role. Okay, the medically important antibiotics were identified specifically. There's several pages of them, but most of them don't affect you. They were listed in Appendix A of Guidance 152, and it's on our website. So these were the drugs that were approved to be VFDs now. The ones that are in red, the penicillin and oleandamycin, only had production claims on them, so the companies have withdrawn them, rather than they don't have any therapeutic claims. So penicillin is still available as an injectable in other dosage forms, but not as a feed. So, and some of these may not be marketed, so that I don't know. You'll have to check with your feed mills, but these are the ones that will now be Veterinary Feed Directive. The VFDs have been around a while. We already had 4 drugs that were approved in that status right from the beginning, and they continue that way. These are the drugs that are going to now need prescription for use in drinking water, and again, some of these may not be available. You'll have to find that out. And 3 of them were already prescription drugs. Okay, don't panic. I'm here to talk you down off the ledge. We really are aware of your needs. We really don't want to make things miserable for you. So I think most of you have veterinarians, and so the valid veterinary client-patient relationship should already be in place. If it's not, you really need to think hard. Be sure that the vet understands what you're going to need. If they're going to be providing the water-soluble powders to you because you can't buy them at Tractor Supply anymore, then you'll have to work that out. But I think it's all doable. The prescriptions As I said, that's one that you'll have to check. The VFDs, they can either give you a paper that you can take to the feed mill, or they can, there's all kinds of software and stuff now that's coming up, which will be pre-populating, and it'll go electronically to the feed mill. So if you don't know what feed mill has VFD drugs, it's on our website. And this is 2 things you want to go exploring on a rainy afternoon. The Bluebird labels are all posted. That's what the feed mill uses to actually put on. It has all the claims for the drug on the information that you might want to see, and you'll be able to see whether they're VFD or not. And then we have a searchable database for all of our approved drugs, and that's the link to it, and it's pretty handy. Okay, the vet needs to prepare the VFD, have the valid relationship with you, and follow the rules. There's a brochure on our website that tells them exactly what they need to do. So if they're a little bit antsy, you just tell them, go here and get this brochure, and it'll walk you right through it. And I'm not going to go through this because of time, but it's all the things you would expect. It's filling out a form. Right, that's all sensible. The main thing I wanted to capture from this one is there has to be a statement on a veterinary feed directive. This is in the law. We couldn't change it. It says that extra-label use is not permitted. So that means if it doesn't say this is for respiratory disease in sheep on it, it's not legal to use it. So that is, I'm going to tell you more about how we're getting around that, but that is the law. And it's on the form, and that was something that caused us a lot of trouble. Okay. There is an expiration date. Your vet can write this for up to 6 months of use, but you're supposed to have it all fed before the 6 months expires. And so that's, if the vet wants to make it shorter than that, they can, but most people want the leeway. They don't have to come out and give it to you that exact day. They can give it to you in advance if you know you're going to have an issue, but you have a 6-month window to use it. This is just real quick. If you get a prescription, sometimes the doctor says you can refill this prescription 3 times. That doesn't apply for VFDs. You're going to need a fresh one every time. Okay. The feed mills, real quick, there's distributors and there's manufacturers who also distribute. Anyone who's distributing VFD feeds is supposed to register with FDA, and that's the list on that link I already shared with you. So if you're looking for anybody, that's where to find them. I can't recommend this page highly enough. There's a wonderful overview video, not as good as Temple Grandin, but better than me, that tells you all about the VFD, and I think it's great, and you should have a look. Okay, I'm a liar here. I really don't give you any goat specifics. I'm just going to tell you what drugs are approved for sheep and what some of the options are, because there's not a lot. Okay, these are the drugs that are approved. They actually have sheep on the label. You can see what it's for. You can see that half of them are VFDs, half of them are over the counter and are going to stay over the counter. If there's a combination feed and any ingredient in the feed is VFD, the whole thing is. So that's, just make that point too. Okay, water medications approved for sheep, these 2, and they are prescription. Okay, so what can you do? All right, we think that, and the FDA, the best thing is to have your drug approved. So call Amy and tell her you need this particular drug if it's not already approved. If the drug is approved, it's been tested, we know what the withdrawal times are, we know what the safe and effective doses are. The next best is legal extra-label use, which I'm going to go into for a minute here. Then enforcement discretion under CPG, which is Compliance Policy Guide 615.115. I'm sure many of you have been using this already to be able to use medicated feeds that are not approved for sheep, because extra-label use of medicated feeds has never been legal. And then the worst thing is just to go make something and use an unapproved drug. Okay, legal extra-label use. This applies to all dosage forms except medicated feeds, and it requires a valid veterinary client-patient relationship. You're not supposed to go to extra-label use unless there's nothing approved that you can use. It has to be therapeutic. The vet has to use some kind of science to assign a withdrawal time, and the vet has to keep appropriate records. So those are all in our regulations. It's been this way since the mid-90s. Limitations are there is a prohibited list for food animals, and I will say that fluoroquinolones and things like that are on that. They can't be extra labeled, whatever the dosage form. The has been, in the last couple of years, some of the cephalosporins were added to this list, and my office really went to bat to make minor species exempt from that. So if the drug, like ceftiofur, is approved for sheep, if you wanted to use it for a disease that's not on the label, you're allowed to. Extra label, that will still be legal. So, okay, again, no medicated feed. So, sad face. There aren't very many things approved for y'all. Extra label use of medicated feed is not legal, and we saw that that was going to be a problem. And not just for sheep, for a lot of our minor species, our game bird producers, aquaculture, honeybees, all those people need these to be able to use these things. So we have a compliance policy guide, unlike the guidance for industry, which is directions to the drug companies. The compliance policy guide is directions to our field inspectors. And it basically, what we're saying is, if you go out and you find that people are complying with what we've written in this compliance policy guide, don't take any action. It's not legal, but just look the other way. So that's called enforcement discretion, and we're allowed to do that, but you have to follow the rules that are in the CPG. We first put it together back in 2001, before we were worried about VFDs, and it was just, they were all over the counter, but they just weren't allowed to be used extra label. And at that time, it was that you had to treat a bag of feed, even though sometimes it's bulk, as if it were a bottle of antibiotic, that you couldn't change anything about it. So if it was approved for cattle, it had to have cattle nutrition, it had to have the cattle dose, the cattle label, everything. So that was the way that it was, and as I said, VFDs were brand new and they were not included. So we've been working on it, but we finally got it published last month, in the nick of time, that because there's no extra label use of VFDs, so it's like doubly illegal because it says right on the VFD you cannot use this extra label. We got together and said, okay, how can we revise the CPG to handle the VFD issue? And we changed one thing that I was really happy, because I've always wanted us to do that, is we changed the requirement that it be a cattle feed, even if you were going to use it in sheep. Now you can modify the nutrition to be appropriate for sheep. So I think that's a big improvement, but you still can't change other things about the feed, like the concentration of the drug. It has to be in accordance with the label. Okay. Again, for a CPG, you've got to have your vet. It has to be therapeutic. We have got a limitation. You can't take an aquaculture drug and feed it to your sheep, or a chicken drug and feed it to your sheep under this policy. But if it's for cattle or swine, you can. And as I said, you can't change the concentration. The CPG spells out everybody's responsibility. It's not a real long document, but it has everything broken out. If it's an over-the-counter status, if it's a VFD, who has to do what? What are your record-keeping requirements for the vet and for the producer, and what does the feed mill have to do? It's all spelled out, and I encourage you to look at it, and that's the link to it. And if your vet is a little nervous about it, hand him a copy, or her, sorry. Okay. All right, so going forward, we need to get more drugs approved. If you can tell the pharmaceutical companies, they consider this a small market, but if they hear from a lot of people that there's a need, when NRSP 7 comes and says to them, if we do the studies, will you file the application and put it on your label? If they've heard from producers that they want this, they're more likely to cooperate with us and maybe even help a little bit. Support the researchers, NRSP 7, and Our office will continue to advocate for you, and we encourage you to contact us with questions or any needs you have. The CPG, we consider it a good Band-Aid, but still a Band-Aid. It's only giving you enforcement discretion, not making it legal. We really want to get to the approvals, and Amy and the NRSP 7 will be happy to help with that. These are all the things that have to be shown for a drug to be approved. They have to show that it's safe and effective and that they can manufacture it properly. NRSP 7 typically does those first 4 components of the application for the drug company, and hopefully the company already knows how to manufacture it. So right now, we got the progesterone cedars approved for sheep. We are almost done with the goats, and some of you may not mind goat projects. We have some early work done with tulathromycin, which is Draxxin. Perfect. And we've been talking to Paul Rogers and Cindy Wolf, and we know that chlortetracycline and meloxicam are things that you have interest in, and so we are in the very early stages of getting funding lined up and looking at the requirements for those. But we'd be happy to hear from you if there are other things you need. You can contact me, you can contact Amy, and we would love to hear from you. And I think I can just entertain some questions now. Wow, I talked fast. Okay, thank you so much for your attention. Okay, yes, sir. Okay, thank you. The question is, what will be on the label if you get a VFD extra label? What will happen is the vet has on the VFD, it will be filled out entirely in accordance with the approved species. So if it's a cattle drug, it'll be filled out entirely for cattle. There's a little box that's called special considerations, and the vet will be required, this is all in the CPG, to put 3 things there. What species he's really going to use it in, what the withdrawal time is going to be, and the statement that says this is being done in accordance with CPG 615.115. And then they staple to it or attach it electronically their recommendation, which says what they're really prescribing it for, the disease that they've diagnosed, how long they want you to treat it. The number of animals should be on there, and even though it says cattle, when it pre-populates, on the bag it will say cattle. What's on the bag will be the approved product, and it will be the nutritional information that you and your nutritionist or the feed mill have worked out for the sheep. But it will be labeled in accordance with the approval. That's required. Okay. Come on, nobody's going to ask me about chlortetracycline? Okay, go ahead.
The issue in our area of Washington coming up is that these small feed stores and some distributors are closing rather than deal with the paperwork for FDA. And the large distributor has basically said you can only buy it by the pallet load, ton at a time.
Wow.
So we're trying to figure out how we're going to be able to supply our producers that don't go through a pallet at a time.
Right.
And I don't know if FDA has even thought of that.
I haven't. I can certainly talk to our feed division and see if they have alternatives. I think what may happen, and I don't know, I'm sort of speculating, we have a list of anybody who's going to distribute it they're required to let us know that they are. So that will be on the website, and people, I've given you the link, you can look and see if there's anybody nearby. And if it may be that some people will change their mind and go back and do some of the niche stuff. Someone else may come forward. I don't know how far things are willing to be shipped. These are all things that I'd be happy to look into. And if you want to send me a specific email, I will get back to you specifically and talk to the people in feeds. Okay, anyone else?
Yeah, first of all, right here in the front row,
Okay.
hiding from you.
Yes.
We actually went through the process just last week, and it was painless, so I want to thank you for at least something coming out of the government that was fairly painless. But my question is on these drugs, and especially the new drugs, how do you determine the human safety effect when we're feeding this to animals that, you know, in theory, there's no residue left before they can go to slaughter? I've never been able to connect that human safety concern.
Right. You all could hear that. There are there's really three different human food safety components. There's the toxicology. We want to make sure that the drug isn't a carcinogen or something right up front, that it's not going to cause genetic problems in the animal or anybody else. Then there's the residue issue, where we want to find out how long does it take for the drug to deplete, add in a safety factor, and say this is how long you have to withhold the drug before the animal goes, or milk, you know, whatever food has to be withheld, that withdrawal time. But the antimicrobial resistance part is the fear that we have a level of bacteria in the animal, even if it seems to be healthy, that it doesn't have anything to do with the residue. It has to do with the fact that the drug and the bacteria have been in contact. The weak ones are gone, the strong ones are there. They're in the animal's digestive tract, because it's the salmonellas and the E. coli's and the campylobacters that we're concerned about. The animal goes to slaughter, there's some contamination of the carcass. Somebody takes it home, they don't clean their cutting board, or they don't cook the hamburger enough, they get sick. Those bacteria that were all exposed to the drug, now they go to the hospital and the doctor tries to give them the same drug, and it doesn't work, because all the weak ones are gone. So that's why, and in terms of what the drug companies have to do, they have to show all of the, that they're going to use it at a level that's going to kill all the bacteria, or at least close enough. They have to demonstrate what the effect is on the human gut flora. And there's a lot that they have to do. So we feel in FDA pretty good about what we've asked the drug companies to do, so that we are not contributing to this problem and adding and taking away these subtherapeutic uses where there's lots of exposure at low doses, which applies a lot of selective pressure for the resistant bacteria, is an important thing to do. And putting the vets in and having them be sure about the withdrawal times and using drugs appropriately, so that you aren't prescribing an antibiotic when it's a viral disease. Those are the two things. Take away the production claims and put the veterinarians on top of it. Does that help? Yeah, thank you. Okay. Anybody else?
Yes. How long do producers have to keep records of when they've used it, and what are the fines if they don't keep records, or are there?
Okay. Good news, we can't fine you. The bad news is you've got to hang on to your records for 2 years. And the VFDs have been around a while. That hasn't changed. And so if you have your veterinarian writes you a VFD and staples on that recommendation to use it Extralabel, then you just need to hang on to that in your invoice, just throw it in your file drawer and have it there in case an inspector ever shows up. So it shouldn't be horrible, but it's the safest thing to do is to have them on hand. Anyone else?
You, right here, you wanted that CTC question, correct?
Sure.
Okay.
Paul told me that was going to be the first one, so go ahead.
I've been misinformed, but I interpreted a chemical or a feed distributor or what is it, a drug company representative yesterday, and it sounded like we could actually use an extra label and refer it to a ruminant, namely cattle, and then treat like shipping fever or pneumonia in my feedlot. Am I correct in assuming that? Or did I receive the right information?
Yes, you did. And again, we're right down to, it's mammal to mammal. So you could use the cattle drug. Your vet has to write you the VFD and staple that recommendation to it. And the question I was actually expecting was that the dose is too low, and we want to change the dose. That you cannot do just as a strict in compliance with the using the approved sheep feed. So if you go in with the Veterinary Feed Directive for the approved chlorotetracycline for sheep, my understanding is the dose is too low for your chlamydia. So what you need to do is you cannot go in and say it's approved at this and I want it 4 times higher in the feed, because that's not on the label. So now you're into Extralabel Use land, which is not okay unless you use the CPG. So your vet can say, okay, you're not allowed to go off-label if there's something approved, except if it doesn't work. So if your vet says it doesn't work and writes in his recommendation, or hers, that it is ineffective at this dose, so I am going to extra label the cattle product or the swine product that's at that label, that level, then they can do that. But they have to document that it's not effective, and they really should call the company and tell them it's not effective and make an adverse drug experience report, because that gives us extra reason to go ahead and try and do the studies to get it approved at a level that will work. We don't want drugs out there that are not effective. So does that get you there? Okay, so, pardon?
How many will be willing to do that?
I think of a,
Is there a liability to it?
not if they follow the CPG. If they follow the CPG, we are not going to do anything to them. And I was in practice before the Animal Medicinal Drug Use Clarification Act was even passed, and we were off-label 90% of the time, because there just isn't everything approved for everything you need. And in those days, we just went by the standard of practice, and nothing bad happened to us as long as we weren't ridiculous. But now we have legal extra-label use, and we have the enforcement discretion. What you can't do is go beyond any approval. You know, if it's approved in swine at 400 parts per million and you want to use 1,000 and nothing's approved, then you just can't do it. But if there is another mammal that's approved, then your vet just has to document it's ineffective, I'm going extra label with this other feed, and now I can change it to sheep nutrition, good to go. Okay? Yes?
I would caution folks that are buying cattle feed that's medicated and using it in sheep that you be sure and consider your copper levels. That's where you would get in the bind, and that's why she said that it needs to be nutritionally available for that animal. So even though the drug may be in there and be fine at that level and recommend, watch your nutrition levels. Be sure you know what your feed mill is putting in that drug or mineral on especially copper in sheep.
Thank you. I think that's good advice. Okay. Well, I don't want to make you all too late here. I have really enjoyed being here, going to your sessions and meeting a lot of you, so don't be strangers. Thank you so much.